When I started making How I Met Your Mother content, the first video I did was about how I believe that Ted Mosby is a con artist, one who uses his desire for finding the one to not only con the women who end up in a relationship with him, extorting their emotional commitment and precious time with them being stuck in a relationship with him, but his character search is also a con on we, the audience, because I do still firmly believe that this show is probably going to just continue to string us along for as many seasons as it has, whilst we all wait to find out how Ted Mosby actually met his children's mother. Now, when I made that initial video, I'd only watched about 5 episodes of season 1 at the time, and whilst I did have my suspicions getting to the end of season 3 and having Ted Mosby in one fucking episode work pour Stella's emotions like a yo yo, breaking up with her in one instance and then proposing in the next. I realized that yes, this dude really is a con artist destined for his relationships to keep failing, and events the way they played out in the season finale with Stella confirms that. Now, before I lose my ever loving mind screaming at Ted doing the Ted thing yet again and putting another woman in yet another compromising situation where he's about to screw things up for her irrevocably. Hello, I'm Noria, and welcome to my How I Met Your Mother series, where I'm currently documenting my first time ever watch of the show whilst sharing my thoughts as I go along. As such, do keep in mind that I have managed to so far stay away from all spoilers of this show. I have no idea what direction it's going to take, how things will pan out with these characters. So do keep that at the forefront of your mind that what this video series is an experiment where you get to watch me taking the show for the very first time, and I share my stream of consciousness thoughts on what is happening as we go along. For those who are keeping track, I am all caught up with season 3, which means that I have watched up to season 3, episode 20, which is the finale. I do have plans to make a video next week about the whole thing with Ted finding out what went down between Barney and Robin. But like I mentioned, I binged the rest of the season, and right now I would like to scream about Ted's choices and his proposal because what? Of course, I would also like to mention that whilst I need you to keep in mind the potential spoilers, if however you do want to make a comment about something that I said that might be tied to upcoming events, but you know would be spoilery for me, just do the spoilers I had warning and put a bunch of asterisks before putting in your comment. That way, I will see said warning and not bother clicking on your comment. But others who are watching this video series alongside you but have been able to finish the show, they will be able to read your comment, and you all can just chat about it in my comment section. Also, please note that I do have a style for these videos. I start with the intro, which you're watching at the moment. Then I move on to the synopsis of the episode that I want to talk about, and then I share my thoughts afterwards. Of course, I put in timestamps to help you navigate the video viewing process as you so choose. And whilst I'm at it, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely Patreons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, How I Met Your Mother season 3 episode 20, titled Miracles, starts with Ted telling his kids, and by extension with the audience, about a predestined cab ride that he was about to go on. Because you see, he would have found himself the passenger of 3 different cabs if circumstances, namely Ted having to wait a while to tie his shoelaces first, hadn't necessitated a different outcome. As it was, Ted enters the 4th cab, which he chalks up to fate. However, before he's able to tell us why it needed to be the 4th cab, Ted takes us back to the past where we see that he's at brunch with Stella. Their relationship has clearly hit its stride. And yes, I will be making another video on the fact that Ted Mosby really cannot keep his mouth shut with his friends. But anyway, he's hanging out with Stella, who mentions it to him that her sister is getting married and she wants Ted to be her date to the wedding. The problem, though, is the fact that the wedding isn't for another 6 months, and this request sends Ted off on a spiral as he remembers Barney's words about it being a terrible idea to plan so far ahead in a relationship. Ted, who is a bloody child, does the most Ted like thing in the situation. He has a full on existential crisis and chooses to break up with Stella with the dreaded words, "We need to talk." Stella is understandably upset and walks away. So now we come back to the present. Ted is in the fourth cab, stuck at the intersection, which is the exact same moment when a speeding car comes out of nowhere and rams into the cab. What then follows are quick cuts of Ted's friends all receiving calls from the hospital, which has them all rushing to head over to see him. As Lily, Marshall, and Robin arrive at Ted's bedside, it is to find him completely fine. No injuries to be seen whatsoever. It is a modern day miracle if you think about it. Of course, Marshall, who is always believed in the supernatural, is quite convinced that this is utterly miraculous. Robin, the cynic, however, doesn't buy it, and what then follows is a sequence of situations and scenarios that Marshall believes supports his miracle theory. The three boys playing with pencils by tossing them up in the ceiling in McLaren's, only for one of said pencils to drop and make its way into Barney's nostril without injuring him. Or Marshall, by some miracle, being able to make his way through the airport, namely US Customs, returning to the US from Amsterdam with smuggled drugs in his backpack and is not caught. Or Marshall almost begging his way into the job he had quit before, but he's saved by a lice infestation that had him bundled out of the office just after his former boss had given him his old job back, the job he hated. And in all the instances that Marshall mentions, Robin insists that none of them was a work of a miracle. It was merely coincidental. All this conversation, however, happens against the backdrop of Ted's miraculous survival. And Ted informs his friends that he had an epiphany the moment just before the crash. You see, whilst the common thought is that our life flashes before our eyes at the moment of near death, Ted meanwhile saw the one he loves. And for him, that was Stella. Thus, Theodore Evelyn Mosby decided that this means that he wants Stella back in his life. Meanwhile, at this moment, at this point, Lily realizes that only the three of them are present. The hospital didn't call Barney because he and Ted are still on the outs. Once again, I will be making a video on that in the future. And so she steps outside to call Barney, who immediately runs out of his work meeting, tries and fails to get a cab that would take him to the hospital, and then proceeds to run all the way to said hospital only to get hit by a bus. Just as he gets to the entrance of the hospital and was about to cross over, Stella, meanwhile, got the call from the hospital and runs over to be with Ted, surprising both Ted and the rest of the crew, sans Barney, when Stella not only kisses Ted, looks happy to be with him and spends some time with him in his room. When Stella steps out of said room to meet Lily, Marshall, and Robin outside, Lily shares her joy about Stella and Ted having gotten back together again. That is when Stella realizes that her conversation with Ted, when he told her that they needed to talk, which she had chalked up to them merely having an argument, was to Ted him making the unilateral decision for them to break up because he was feeling out of sorts with regards their relationship. Stella is justifiably pissed and informs Ted that that breakup he wanted, well, he's got it now. And she walks away. Before Ted can react to this, however, they get a phone call from the hospital about Barney having been run over by a bus, just as he was crossing the street to walk into the hospital. Thankfully, Barney survives, but all the bones in his body were broken in the hit, except his dick. Marshall, as expected, considers this a miracle, a second miracle for the day, which Robin again disproves. But when she's pressed about why she's so against the gang believing in miracles, she finally admits that, you see, when she was a kid, her dog Sir scratched one was dying. But upon taking him to the vet, Child Robin had been informed that there was a newly discovered medical procedure that would help save her dog's life. One could even call it a miracle. But when her dog returned, it wasn't a dog anymore. The surgery had turned her dog into a turtle, and said turtle just wouldn't play fetch the way Sasquatch one used to. Now, Robin finally admits that it took her a while to realize that the truth, was that she didn't have a dog. Now, whilst all of this is happening, Ted gets very emotional that Barney would do all of this, even risk his own life to get to him because he thought Ted was injured in the hospital. Realizing just how much Barney does care for him, Ted forgives him and they make up, which, once again, I will make my Barney and Ted video later, maybe next week. Probably next week. Ted, now reunited with Barney after he's informed that his test came back all clean and he's free to go, rushes off to go see Stella, who is at Kiddie Funland with her daughter. Whilst Ted tries to get to Stella on time, Marshall and Lily ask Barney what was the last thing he saw before he was hit by the bus. Since Ted told them that he saw the things he loved at the moment of almost death, they figured that Barney must have seen something that was a mix of a shit ton of money and all the sexy ones with some good alcohol thrown into the mix. Barney smiles and agrees with them that he did see all that he loved while smiling in the direction of an oblivious Robin. Oh, Barney, you big sap. But also, really? Show? Really? This is how it. Anyway, back to Ted, who does catch Stella while she's at Kiddie Funland and hands her a kangaroo stuffed animal which he had won at the claw machine after several attempts to get her a ring. Because here is the thing, Theodore Evelyn Mosby believes that he is now ready to give Stella what she needs, and what he believes she needs, mind you, is a fucking proposal. The end. I swear, I don't think I've screamed Ted's name as much as I did whilst watching the last 5 minutes of the season. Because what do you mean by what Stella needs from you is for you to propose to her, Theodore Evelyn Mosby? The audacity of this man, the unmitigated gall of this man. A proposal, really? Now, before I totally lose my shit, let's come back around to the premise slash title of this video, because nothing quite sells the concept of Ted Mosby as a big time crook as it pertains to the matters of love quite like this episode, because it really does show step by step Ted's MO with regards to the women he gets caught in his web and the heartbreak that then follows, all of which is rooted in his own wants and feelings and desires as he takes and takes from them without fully understanding or taking the time to even wonder at or consider what it is that these women want or what they are deserving of in turn. Now, am I saying that Ted does any of this with some sort of malicious intent? Of course not. As we can tell from the series and the tale he's telling his children, Ted really does believe in his own bullshit. To be fair, the best con artists do. They have to. It's the only way they can successfully swindle others when they really think about it. Because the best part about being a very good liar is that you need to sell it so well that hell, you even start believing in your lie yourself. It also doesn't help matters that Ted Mosby is someone who doesn't really think things through. Matter of fact, he often gets carried away in the moment and is so laser focused on what it is that he wants and the chance to get it that he often will speak without thinking or foresight with the hope that the woman he's with would get carried along, forgetting all their previous objections, because in the face of what Ted wants and how he's glowing with that desire, all sweet tongued and enthusiastic about the future and everything his love would bring, it is so easy for the women to in turn get caught up with it. Ted himself then ends up getting caught up with it, which ultimately ends up hurting these women and Ted as well. We see this with Victoria, we see this with Robin, and now we are going to see it with Stella. Because make no mistake about this, I honestly do not think that Ted and Stella are endgame. I refuse to believe that she's the mother in this story because her experience is replicated in all the women that came before her in Ted Mosby's life. And as we know so far, none of them actually ended up walking down the aisle to him, no matter how enthusiastic Ted might have been in the beginning. And I think for me, this will not end well as it pertains to Ted and Stella, their relationship that has been ringing in my ears started from the very start of their relationship, of course. Ted has always refused to hear the word no, and the narrative kept trying and failing, as far as I'm concerned, to paint his refusal to just accept this woman's initial pushing to not getting into a relationship with him as being romantic. I will always say it in these videos, it is not, but Ted likes to pretend that it is. Victoria said no initially, is to pursued her to a place of work. Robin said no several times, but he persisted until she got feelings for him. And then we have Stella, who right out the bat told him that she doesn't want to date her patient, and Ted uses the entire period of her rendering her service of ridding him of his tramp stamp butterfly tattoo to try and wear her down. And ultimately, she did cave when they were done with his sessions, and things proceeded from that. Because of their start, Ted established that he would always railroad over what Stella wants or is saying until he convinces her otherwise. Now, do I personally think that this is something that might come around and bite not just Stella in the ass, but Ted as well? Yes. Because the one thing that Ted Mosby seems to never quite grasp is the fact that if you have to beg and prod and push someone into getting into a relationship with you, then ultimately you end up wanting said relationship more than the other person, wanting more than the other person in your relationship. And the more is where things always get tricky. Because with Robin, yes, they did get into said relationship, but she was always clear about where she stood with regards to children and marriage as a whole. But because Ted has spent the start of their meeting not really listening to what Robin wants and fixating on his own desire for a happy family life, born from his incessant search of the one after Lily and Marshall's engagement, it meant that Ted entered their relationship with that desire in his mind. Robin did not. And so, when things develop to the point where Ted gets carried away in the moment, in the middle of their argument, mind you, and decides to flat out question Robin about her aversion to marrying him and having children with him, is hit with the realization that this woman he loves doesn't want the same thing as he does. And whilst the story, or technically since he's the one telling us, Ted wants us to feel sorry for Ted, I can't in good conscience do so because we established that he never really does care about what his partners want and tends to trick and delude himself that they are on the same page as he is until they end up ripping the rug out from underneath him. Robin has done so, and honestly, at this point, I am just waiting for Stella to do the same. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she will prove me wrong. But if she does prove me right, best believe I would be laughing my ass out. Not necessarily because I delight in seeing Ted's world utterly shaking on its head, or who am I kidding? You know I do, but I would love it because it technically would highlight Ted's biggest flaw in the narrative. He never chooses the women who ultimately want the same thing as he does. Instead, he goes out of his way to get with the women who want something else with the hope that ultimately they will come around and want what he desires as well. Now, before you say, but Noria, you can't tell us that Stella doesn't want marriage. Like, come on, of course she does. I would like to point out that nowhere in her conversations with Ted has marriage come up, at least not whilst they were on screen together. Matter of fact, we see that she's always been a bit hesitant about even introducing her daughter to the men she's with until sufficient time has passed. And in fact, what gets her to have Ted meet Lucy was Ted being manipulative as well and trying to evade taking responsibility for a gross invasion of privacy that he had perpetuated, which I will address in my video about Ted's insistent need to share everything with his friends, which is something that has irked me ever since the brief stint when he dated BB, or as the gang called her, blah blah, back in the How I Met Everyone Else episode. Yes, I definitely would be addressing that because it's equally an important part of Ted's psyche and does influence his romantic relationships and the hold his friends have on those. But as I was saying, Ted's manipulation is what sped up his meeting of Lucy. But even as it all went down, we established that Stella, who is successful at her job and is quite busy being a mother of one, has carved a space in a way where she gets to regulate what when her partners meet her daughter, is someone who is clearly a planner and not in a rush to get into a relationship, talk less of a marriage. And now you have Ted, who 10 bloody seconds ago had chosen to just break up with Stella out of the blues because he caught cold feet, even though she wasn't actually pressing him for much beyond being a date to a sister's wedding that was 6 months away, but it was enough to have him running for the hills. It took a near death experience for him to decide that he wants Stella back, but not in their let's get back into our old relationship way, because honestly, Stella had broken up with him and was quite ready to walk away. Ted, rather than accepting that he's fucked up and messed up a good thing, does that thing again where he's railroading Stella. This time around, not into being in a relationship with him, but into marrying him after dating for only a couple of months. He wants this single mother of one to pledge her life to him on the exact same day that she found out that his ass, when he gets overwhelmed or into his head, thinks we need to talk equates a breakup or warrants a breakup. Emotional intelligence speaking, Ted is not on the same page or level as Stella is. And whilst Ted can just rush headlong into whatever he wants or dreams or schemes up in his head, Stella is someone that we can tell would always have to take her time and really consider the decision she's taking and the end result of that, because she's a mother. She has a kid. She can't just half-ass anything like Ted chooses to do often. And so, once again, Ted Mosby is someone who tends to go for the women that often don't want the same thing as he does. But he will do what he always does in these relationships: ignore their objections, refuse to take no, push and push until they agree. And when ultimately it blows up in their faces, the women are often hurt, and so is Ted. Also, I don't think it's a coincidence that in all his conversations about Stella, Ted must be eternal romantic, has never not once talked about Stella being the one. I find it very interesting that he stopped saying that. Of course, to me, it is tied to the fact that after he got with Robin at the end of season one, he had to him at that point in time gotten the one. And so Robin fit that slot perfectly. But by the end of season two, after their relationship ended, he can't continue to refer to Robin as the one anymore, seeing that ultimately they both want different things and are not aligned on their own needs and who they ultimately are. And after Robin, there was the brief moment of him dating various women, none of whom he ever had the space to claim as being the one because they weren't serious. The first serious relationship that Ted has gotten into after his breakup with Robin is Stella. Stella, who just like Robin initially didn't want to get with him. Stella, who just like with Robin, he had to push and prod into dating him. Stella, who just like Robin, we can see that Ted is rushing headlong into wanting from her something that she's never categorically stated that she wants with him. Stella, who just like when it happened with Robin, Ted decided that the best way to diffuse an argument with the situation rapidly slipping out of his control was by making a proposal. In Robin's case, it was the declaration that he was going to uproot his life and relocate to be with her in Argentina and have kids with her there if that was where she was going. Whilst with Stella, it's a marriage proposal after she realized that he had broken up with her for arbitrary reasons and now wants her back. And yet, in all of this, Ted never makes the claim that Stella is the one. Now, there is the potential to approach this as Ted Busby having grown up and maybe he knows better now and isn't as obsessed with the idea of a perfect true love as he was at the start of the show. But now, I don't think so. I very much think that Ted is still stuck on the idea of finding the one. And what has happened instead is that a near death situation has us fear at him almost dying and everything just coming to an end for him. It has turned it into an obsession to cling to what he has right now. And right now, that is Stella. She's him settling for the I almost died and now I get the chance to live, so I would do so. And one way to do that is to get married phase that he's currently in. And before you tell me that, but Noria, he said at the time of his death, he saw the person he loves, and that is Stella. I will still point out that just because he told his friends and by extension with the audience doesn't necessarily mean that what he feels for her is the same intangible desire for the one that he's been obsessed with over the last 3 years. And maybe it is me being cynical, but what's not to say that he might not end up running into the one again in like the next 6 months, sometime during the period of their engagement. Should Stella say yes to him, then what happens then? Plus, just because she's the one he saw at the moment of his almost death, doesn't give him carte blanche to propose to her. I mean, let us be real. Barney also saw Robin at the point of his almost death. Did he go running to propose to her immediately that happened? No, he lied his ass off about what he saw. The fact that Barney in that scenario was very much aware that a near death experience did not automatically mean that he gets to get the girl he wants. And Ted cannot accept that and even goes as far as springing a sudden proposal on the woman who had broken up with him because of his own idiocy says a lot. Like, in what universe is Barney Stinson the more mature one of the duo? Like, what? But yeah, those are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you on Monday with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.